There was a time when her face felt inescapable, appearing in living rooms across Britain, filling cinema screens with a quiet power that drew audiences in without ever asking for permission. Francesca Annis possessed that rare, magnetic stillness, a beauty that didn't need to announce itself, a voice that carried emotion even when it barely rose above a whisper. To many, she seemed destined to live her life in the heart of the public eye. But the image the world adored was only half of her story. At the height of her acclaim, when her presence seemed woven into the fabric of British film and television, she made a choice that no one saw coming. She stepped away without a speech, without a farewell, without even a hint of what she might be protecting or escaping. Her departure wasn't a fall from grace. It was an absence that left behind an unsettling silence. What drives someone so admired, so accomplished, to abandon the life others spend their whole lives chasing? Before mystery surrounded her name, Francesca Annis had already carved out a place for herself as one of Britain's most captivating performers. Her journey through the world of acting unfolded with a natural grace, as if every step she took on stage or in front of a camera was guided by an instinct honed long before anyone recognized her talent. By the time the public truly discovered her, she had already mastered the art of embodying characters with a delicacy and depth that set her apart from her peers. Her role as Lady Jessica in Dune introduced her to audiences far beyond the United Kingdom, revealing an actress who could command science fiction just as effortlessly as Shakespearean tragedy. Each new project seemed to reaffirm what critics repeated for years. Francesca Annis didn't simply perform, she transformed. Television directors relied on her precision, theater lovers admired her classical control, and viewers found themselves drawn to the emotional truth she carried into every scene. Throughout the height of her career, her name appeared in headlines celebrating her versatility and presence. She stood at the center of British entertainment, shaping its cultural memory with performances that lingered long after the credits rolled. Yet buried beneath all that admiration was a quieter story waiting to surface, one that hinted that fame, despite its glow, was beginning to feel heavy in her hands. Long before she became a familiar presence on British screens, Francesca Annis was shaped by a childhood marked by movement, discipline, and a quiet curiosity about the world. Spending her early years between continents, she absorbed cultures and rhythms that would later influence the way she approached performance, never loud, never forced, but grounded in an inner steadiness few actresses possessed. Her early training in dance taught her the language of the body, how emotion could be carried not only in words but in breath, posture, and stillness. Entering the world of acting was not a sudden leap, but a natural flow, as if she had been drifting toward it long before she understood what it truly meant. Still, the beginning was not without uncertainty. She questioned her place, wondered whether she belonged among others who projected confidence so effortlessly, and doubted whether audiences would understand the kind of emotional subtlety she brought to her roles. Yet directors recognized something rare in her, an ability to hold silence without losing power, to let emotions simmer instead of explode. Her first real breakthrough arrived not through spectacle, but through roles that demanded vulnerability and restraint. Classical theater welcomed her with open arms, giving her space to explore characters whose complexity matched her own natural instincts. Audiences began to take notice, sensing that she carried something deeper than charm, a quiet conviction that made even her simplest gestures feel significant. By the time she stepped into the larger spotlight, it felt less like a rise and more like an unveiling. Francesca Annis wasn't chasing fame. She was simply stepping into a destiny that had been waiting for her all along. Success often arrives hand in hand with sacrifice, and for Francesca Annis, the climb toward prominence demanded more from her than the public ever realized. With every celebrated role came another layer of expectation, another set of eyes watching, analyzing, and constructing their own version of who she was supposed to be. The precision that made her performances unforgettable gradually became a standard she was expected to meet at all times, on set, in interviews, even in the most private corners of her life. The pressure tightened its grip as her personal world intersected with the relentless attention of the media. When her relationship with Paul McGann erupted into the headlines, the quiet reserve she had always maintained became a shield she could barely hold. Private decisions were picked apart, motives assigned to her by strangers who had never heard her speak a word. Overnight, she became a subject of scrutiny rather than admiration, and the emotional toll of that shift began to carve itself deeply into her life. It was a turning point, one that blurred the line between her craft and the chaos that hovered at its edge. At the same time, opportunities from Hollywood continued to knock at her door, projects that could have propelled her into a new realm of global recognition. But she sensed the cost long before she ever considered accepting them. To embrace that level of fame meant surrendering the last pieces of herself that remained untouched. She had already given enough: her privacy, her certainty, her peace. So she did what few at her level dared to do. She set boundaries. She stepped back. She chose herself over the momentum of an industry that never stops demanding more. And in doing so, she began moving toward a silence few understood, but perhaps she had needed all along. The unraveling of Francesca Annis's presence in the public eye did not arrive with spectacle or scandal, but with a slow, almost imperceptible fading. There was no final interview, no public farewell, no declaration of exhaustion. Instead, she simply began to drift away from the center she had once held so firmly. After the turbulence surrounding her private life, the rhythm of her career changed in subtle but unmistakable ways. Scripts still came, directors still reached out, but her willingness to engage with the demands of the industry had shifted into something quieter, almost reluctant. Those around her noticed the transformation before the public did. She became more guarded, more withdrawn, as though the constant glare of attention had left her skin raw. The very spotlight that once illuminated her talent now felt harsh and intrusive. She declined projects that would have placed her back in the frenzy of public conversation, choosing instead roles that asked less of her visibility and more of her interior world. Each choice widened the distance between who she had been and who she was becoming. As the years passed, that distance turned into absence. Productions moved on without her. New stars emerged to fill the spaces she once occupied, and audiences who once recognized her instantly now spoke her name less and less. Yet there was no sense of collapse, only a quiet letting go, an acceptance of a life beyond the demands of performance. Whether it was weariness, disillusionment, or a deep need for solitude, she stepped into the shadows without hesitation, and with every step she took away from the light, her mysterious disappearance became one of the most haunting parts of her legacy. For a woman who had spent so much of her life moving between fictional worlds and the bright scrutiny of public attention, Francesca Annis's retreat from the stage felt less like an ending and more like a quiet act of self-preservation. She offered no sweeping explanation and no attempt to clarify her reasons. Instead, she allowed herself to slip beyond the noise, as though stepping into a softer life she had long kept at a distance. In the place where many expected a dramatic farewell, she chose something far simpler: silence. Her later appearances were rare, almost delicate small roles that seemed chosen not to reignite her fame, but to honor the relationship she still held with her craft. To those watching closely, these moments carried a subtle tenderness, as if she approached them with gratitude rather than ambition. She no longer sought the spotlight's warmth or its validation. What she embraced instead was an existence defined by privacy, routine, and a sense of inner steadiness that the industry had never been able to offer her. Those who encountered her in this quieter chapter described a woman at peace, someone who had stepped away from the expectations of an audience and into the clarity of her own choosing. She did not chase the echoes of her former career, nor attempt to reclaim the place she had once held. Her last curtain call was not a dramatic gesture or a symbolic departure, just the gentle act of turning toward a life where she finally belonged. And although the world once watched her with such intensity, she seemed content knowing that the greatest performance she would ever give was the one she walked away from. Francesca Annis's legacy is not measured by constant visibility or a long list of headline-making roles, but by the subtle impact she left on those who truly watched her. Her performances carried a rare emotional clarity, quiet, precise, and deeply felt, that allowed her characters to linger in the minds of viewers long after the credits faded. Whether it was the poised strength she brought to Dune or the elegant intensity she offered in her Shakespearean work, she shaped roles that still resonate with a timeless quality. Among those who worked with her, she is remembered not only for her talent but for the professionalism and quiet discipline she carried into every room. Directors spoke of her ability to elevate a scene with the smallest gesture. Colleagues admired the thoughtful intelligence she brought to her craft, and audiences who revisit her films today often find layers in her performances they hadn't noticed before. She didn't command attention with volume or theatrics. She earned it through presence. Her long withdrawal from public life has transformed her into a figure of quiet fascination. In choosing distance over constant exposure, she created a different kind of immortality, one shaped not by relentless visibility, but by the mystery she left behind. Younger audiences discovering her work for the first time often sense the depth of a performer who poured herself fully into her art, even as she later chose a life beyond its demands. What remains of Francesca Annis is more than a filmography. It is the enduring impression of a woman who understood the power of choosing her own story, even when it meant walking away from the world that once celebrated her. Fame is often imagined as a promise, an open door to admiration, opportunity, and a life shaped by applause. But Francesca Annis's story reveals something far more complex, that fame can also become a weight, a mirror that distorts, a world that demands more of a person than they ever intended to give. She conquered the screen with grace, captivated audiences with performances that felt effortlessly alive, and shaped an era of British entertainment with her quiet brilliance. Yet in the end, she chose something few have the courage to claim, a life defined not by visibility, but by peace. Her departure from the spotlight invites reflection. Was it a way to reclaim her privacy? A deeply personal decision to protect herself from a world that had taken too much? Or was it simply the recognition that the truest version of her life existed far away from the noise she once inhabited? Whatever her reason, her story lingers not as a tragedy, but as a reminder that stepping back can sometimes be the most powerful act of all. As you consider her journey, her rise, her silence, the choices that shaped her path, what stays with you? Do you remember the actress who lit up the screen, or the woman who chose to walk away before the world could define her completely? And if you had the chance to speak to her now, what would you want to say? If this story resonated with you, share your thoughts below and let your voice join the conversation. Fame and shadows, every star has its story.